Still, it's a very different way of working when you're not all getting together in a room together for collaboration sessions or being able to look over someone's shoulder and look what's on their monitor. So it's been a challenge. It requires a lot more communication and a lot more.
Attention, people are starting. We are the ones in charge. We are Zero Threat.
Jump points, the gateways between star systems. These wormholes through space bring with them the promise of Star Citizen's expansion beyond just the Stanton system. And at CitizenCon 2949, we got to see the first successful traversal between stellar clusters with our arrival in Pyro. Now, from the branching path design to the volumetric cloud tech encompassing it, from the massive gateway structure itself to the particle eddies the player must navigate within, from the lighting to the VFX and more, to celebrate this milestone, we sat down at the desk of Assistant Art Director Jake Gainey for a decompressed discussion of all aspects covering the creation of our very first jump point, and to hear from some of the members of the team who worked to bring Star Citizen's first gateway between star systems to life.
We've always known it, we want to do like wormholes and jump points. Some previs was done I think back in 2014, 2015. A lot of early concepts went out to Chris. I was working with Marcel on the concept side of things. So we've done a lot of loose investigations first to understand, do we want something big, do we want something that's small, does it fit into the lore of SC? There's several things that you can play with, such as, is it spherical, is it cylindrical, is it square? The very kind of like core shapes that you can kind of play with. And then how that thing would operate, how you'd enter it, what's it look like to the third person as well as the first person. So just to get those ideas out there, and then several iterations for weeks, right? And then we kind of like settled on what you kind of saw in the demo.
So kind of like it's a really good opportunity for me to now show you some of the content live in the editor, maybe run through some of the processes that we went through to build this content, and just speak a little bit about our processes. This is the Stanton location, but it isn't just confined to one area as well. Like the cool thing is that, I don't know if you noticed from the demo, but we arrived at the edge of a nebula. This is all contained in the same scene, so I can zoom out of this location now. And you can see again, this is fully volumetric, so the approach for this is using the gas cloud tech that's been developed. I mean, it's been developed specifically for the coil, but the more that we've developed with it, the more that we've realised that we can actually start to build entire space scenes with this. And for the persistent universe, obviously, it's less of a linear experience than it is for Squadron 42, because with Squadron 42 we know the exact location that will bring players into these spacescapes, and we'll know how we're going to direct the player into them. When we're building content for the persistent universe, it needs to be a little bit more 360 than that. It needs to be a bit more flexible. So you can see from this gas cloud that we've got here, we can pretty much move it to any position, and we'll still be able to get like a kind of a good feeling from it and a cool vibe. The cool thing is, and something that we've done a lot in Squadron 42 as well, is been able to actually construct these areas with polygons, with the design team to get exactly what we want represented in the engine. Just to show you a little bit behind the process to building spacescapes like this with this volumetric tech, we do use a little bit of Houdini to kind of generate this content. And I can show you, this is obviously this is a combination of various different elements. We've had a lot of internal tools developed by the VFX tech team, who have built what we call CIG cloud tools. They build the CIG cloud tools to be able to basically turn geometry into gas cloud. So with this kind of like shape that you see here, this has all been built out of geometry, out of my own preference. I've built this in 3ds Max, but really you can build this in Houdini as well. And then we're able to almost sculpt environments with geometry and then turn it into the gas cloud afterwards. So I can just quickly boot up the actual wormhole itself. This is it's a separate scene. Actually, in the game, it's part of an object container, so we stream this in. We've had like a new entity built. I don't know a great deal about the entity. The awesome part of this is as you're traversing through the wormhole, we're actually going into a completely new system. You know, we're not faking anything here. We're actually traveling to a new system, and even myself working on this every single day, that still blows my mind. I'm still kind of completely taken aback by the technology that we're able to kind of bring with this game. We had Ben Parry, who's one of the graphics engineers in the UK, come in and build us a brand new shader.
There's already a shader that the VFX team has used that's mostly for doing kind of like where you would use a particle effect but you don't want to have one, and that's called VFX transparent. So that has a lot of tweakable, slidery kind of things for them to mess around with. So what we actually did was combine that with a more traditional shader that could do lighting and opaque geometry and that kind of thing. And then threw all that in front of Jake, and he picked out which bits he was actually going to use. So then we just deleted out all the bits that we didn't want to use and then started specializing different parts of it to get the kind of details that he wanted out of it.
You just kind of fly through it and you can see some of the kind of variations that we have to the tunnels. This is all real time in the engine as well. Like we're kind of, again, we're not faking anything here. This is all kind of constructed, and you can see there's lots of kind of cool variations. We built this for the demo. We never actually go down these routes, but conversations that we had with design very early on, with Tobias in design, we were saying, okay, well, we have the capability with the technology that we have to build secondary routes. Do you want them in? And he was like, yeah, cool, put them in. We might not go down them, but we've got them and we can explore them if we need to. So it's good to know that in the future that we'll hopefully have kind of branching paths and the opportunity to go to different locations here. So you can see from here, like the deformation of the surface we had vertex deformation in the engine before, but the vertex deformation that we had, the vertex deformation, by the way, is driving the kind of, I suppose, the animation on the surface of this thing. The vertex deformation we had in previous shader work was very uniform, and we couldn't get any variation or displacement to the way that kind of animates on the surface. So something that Ben put into the shader with it for us was the ability to put variation in that deformation so we could get this kind of like otherworldly feel to it. And I think that's something that really helped when it came online. And then we had Caleb, who's the principal VFX artist, come online and build a lot of the local particles that we see in the tunnel as well. And I actually think that really helped give directionality to the tunnel when we felt like we were losing it because of the speed being slowed down. Caleb came in and built these particles that you see here, and I felt that brought a lot of that back, hopefully, just in time for the demo. There is something that kind of tripped us up as well, though, because quite late on, we had some feedback during, I think, a very late playtest.
We received quite a lot of feedback on the first iteration of this thing because we wanted to feel incredibly fast, which meant I made it incredibly fast. But then you couldn't do 2 straight turns. You couldn't do a 90-degree turn because the character would 100% crash because it like the speed I had. But we got feedback constantly that it was like, no, I want more turns, I wanted more up and downs, we got a good reference with Space Mountain, and we looked at a lot of YouTube videos on like that, and roller coasters in general, especially with this like, how you build up to this like, when you go up before you get a free fall. So then Jake and we just talked and made changes to his spline, because obviously that modular set was kind of working then, so we could go to Houdini, which he worked in, move the spline around quickly, export it, which was a little bit of work, but then we could get it into game and we could test it again.
So what you can see here on the screen is the tunnel route entirely. So it's from start to finish. The way this began is that Tobias in design would go away and he would construct the tunnel out of what we call designer solids, so simple primitives in the engine, and then we would come in afterwards and use Houdini to generate that into a mesh.
My first point I put in my head that I always kept there was like, it needs to be modular built, so it could use our modular tech that we're already building and we're using for like the rest stops.
So you can see this is obviously the kind of final generated mesh, all of the chambers, and also if I zoom in here as well, you'll see the obstacles. Columns are obstacles. We call them internally the obstacles that you fly between. They're all procedurally generated across the surface of the tunnel as it builds the mesh, and it's all driven by this spline here. So what we've built in the end is we were very, very keen to build a system that we could, generate hundreds of these in the future, or to build more and more of this content, and to also have that flexibility that we needed from design. So design would come online and say, we want like this part of the tunnel to be 90-degree turn. It's no problem because you can take the spline here, you can move it around. It takes a little while to generate, but you can see how straight away we've got an entirely new route there, and it's procedurally generated the columns across that route, it's procedurally generated the chambers across that route. So we've got a system, hopefully, that's got a lot of flexibility to it. We need to change anything, we need to build anything, it's all there and it's all possible. And actually, in the end, we had an awful lot of support from both the VFX tech team and also a lot of VFX artists on building the final content. So actually what we delivered was a real team effort for building the wormholes.
So what did we learn this week? We learned that the technologies developed for Squadron 42 can benefit Star Citizen's persistent universe in new and exciting ways, and that jump points are more than just connections between star systems. They aim to test a pilot's mettle as you navigate its eddies and flows, obstacles, and branching paths within. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.
You're probably thinking I'm a goner. But the thing is, I've died 1,000 times. Because a regen has always been the strategy. Let's do this. One more time.
Now, I've been to every IAE in recent memory, and year after year it remains a thrill to traipse amongst the multitudinous warbirds of Aegis Dynamics. From the classic Gladius to the Protean Avenger, Aegis has been at this a long time, and their fleet is celebrated to this day. The Vanguard series remains an industry standard in long-range fighters. The 2949 models sport vintage-inspired, throwbacky exteriors, improved and expanded interior cabins, and of course, a lot of weapons. And if huge ballistic repeaters and a plethora of missiles aren't enough, you can always drop a few of these big nasties via the Nautilus mine layer, celebrating 400 years of service this year. To drive the point home, they've been trotting out these decommissioned proximity charge mines, which I'm told are completely safe. But what do you say we find out just how confident Aegis is about their prop here? Thank you, Jimmy. For science! Next on Whitley's Guide, we parley with the salty dogs at the Drake Interplanetary Pavilion. Cutlass, I don't even know the lass. Yah!
Your targets will never know what hit them. The ballista from Anvil. Rise above.
We have Josh Herman, Mr. Ali Brown, and last but not least, Sean Tracy. How's everybody doing? Good? All right. My name's Josh Herman. I'm going to talk to you guys about some characters. I'm the character art director here at Cloud Imperium, and we're going to show you guys some pretty sweet stuff. So let's start. Right. So what we're going to talk to you about today is basically the character pipeline from beginning to end. So we're going to start with the project selection, project requirements. We're going to go through narrative design. We're going to go through concept. We're going to go through character art. We're going to talk about some materials, talk about rigging and sim, and then we're going to talk about getting all of those items into the game and creating things that you, the players, play as. So let's start with the requirements for characters in Star Citizen. One of the biggest things that we really value ourselves on is that we don't have background characters. So yes, in Squadron 42, you will play as a hero, and there will be background characters, but in reality, you're going to be able to get up close to any of those characters just like you would any of our AAA actors. You're going to be able to interface with Mark Hamill very closely. You're going to be able to interface with Gary Oldman, every character there. And very similar in the Persistent universe in Star Citizen, there isn't a background character. You can get up to any of our NPCs. You can get up to any of our mission givers face to face. And we want that. But with that comes a bunch of problems, right? First problem is we scan all of our actors' heads, and we'll talk about this later, but it creates a reason for the fidelity for all of our work to be extremely high. When we start with something that's really good, the performance is really good on our faces, on our animations, and our character assets. Everything has to be high, and you're going to see that later. Ali's going to talk to you about some of our materials, about our hair, about our skin, and simulation with Sean, and everything needs to be a very high level. So I'll show you a quick little level of some of the characters that we've been working on. This is including, I don't think this has any clones, there might be a couple. Some of our characters wear duplicated costumes or uniforms, which is one of the ways we get around not having to make bespoke assets for every single character. So you're going to see some in here. You're going to see in the keynote, I think we are just past, or there he is, there's Clovis Darneely right in the middle. And each one of these is going to use stuff that we're talking about today, because it's all of our character stuff, kind of just showing you the amount of characters on screen that we're handling at one time as well. But let's start with the project distinction. So I wanted to start with this because it basically, we have different requirements for both of our games. So Squadron has over 250 speaking roles, which alone is an insane amount of work. But it also means that, again, there's no background characters, but now we need to make assets, we need to make costumes, we need to make hair, we need to make all these things for each individual character. But some characters might wear multiple costumes. Old Man, for example, wears a couple different costumes. He's going to wear a suit, a pilot suit if he's going to be in his Gladius. If he's going to be, walking around the Idris, maybe he's going to be wearing an officer's uniform. And that's going to be multiple different characters throughout this. The PU, however, has different requirements. We want to make sure that the players are creating their own journey, right? It's not about forcing you on a railroaded path or even on a single-player path. It's about a multiplayer experience. And you're going to be able to do different things with that. But let's start with Squadron 42. So the first thing we're going to jump into is the narrative and design. This is where we start everything. So the who, what, where, when, why, basically, is what we start with. Let's say we have any character. Here we're going to use Steve Colton, Old Man, Mark Hamill. And this is our design brief. This is what we get from the narrative team. And we also get this from the design teams. Let's start with the top. Who? This is the physical description of the character. This is what they look like. Very simple, right? You can see here on the right. So he is male, age 45 to 55. His eyes are hazel. Hair color is steel gray. So you can kind of get a very simple description. And this gives character art and concept art something to start working with. The what? The what is the gameplay component. So what is Old Man going to have to do in the game? Is he going to have to fly a ship? Are you going to have to interact with him ever? Is he going to have to be in FPS combat? These are all things that we need to know for the game. The where and when. This is chapters of the game. This is what locations characters will be in. Are they just on a ship and you never see them again? Are they your wingman and they fly around with you the entire time and you're going to interact with them a lot more? These are all important elements for us to know. And then the why is the brief detailed description. If you played a tabletop RPG, you've probably made pages and pages of backstory for your characters. We have pages and pages of stuff for our characters here. I put a little bit down here, you can see the description and backstory, but one of the lines that's one of my favorites is, Old Man has seen it all. It's his vast sea of experience that makes him an incredible teacher and up-and-coming pilot. Unfortunately, he's not a people person. And that alone gives you a little bit of a description of what that character is, right? One thing you'll also notice is we have pictures of the actors. So there's some pictures of Mark Hamill. The picture on the left is actually from the scanning session that we did with him. And you'll see on the picture on the right is, something you would expect more from a press junket or something like that where he's going to be out in public. And so one thing with this as well is, and you're going to see this later as well, is we need to take those scanned actors when they come in, typically as early in the morning, 8 a.m., and they have to go through a whole series of scans and photos and reference and doing that. And sometimes they get a little tired. It's not the most energizing experience sitting there and making faces, just doing that kind of stuff isn't super exciting. So we need to make them look good, and that's why we add things like that on the right, which is the pictures of kind of a bar for us to hit of what they should look like. In Star Citizen, it's a little bit different. Stories are created by the characters in Star Citizen. They're created by the players. And also we have a whole different element, which is we're going to be going to different locations, right? We're going to be going to different planets. We're going to have different moods. And so you'll see the descriptions on the right is much more simpler. It's about what manufacturer creates these items. It's about where these items are going to show up. And it's more about creating something that's a look or a mood for a place than it is about a character that's going to go on a story and what they need for that story. The only real exception for that is something like a mission giver. But even within that, they're going to kind of fit that mold. So like Miles Eckhart wears stuff from Levski. Clovis Darneely wears stuff from Hurston. But even still, they're going to get something that's kind of a little bit custom to them. So after this, we go into the concept stage. So here you're going to see some concepts for the UEE Marines. And this is basically a scattershot approach or a shotgun approach, depending what you want to call it. And this is where we throw out all different kinds of ideas. So these are all variations of concepts for the same character, right? We know that we want them to be strong. They're in the military. They're some sort of a power armor, right? That's what we want our Marines to be like. So we go through all these concepts, we kind of play around with it, we come up with some fun ideas, and maybe we create visuals for those, or maybe we just created a cool visual and we make up ideas for that, like what that could be. Made an interesting shape, what could this be? And we just kind of go through those. Once we're done with these, we move on to the selects, or that's what I would call them, where we take our favorite elements of each one and we combine it into a couple. Or maybe we liked 10 of the ones that we had. Of the 10, we choose 3, and we combine elements of the 3 to create 1 or variations on that 1. So here you see some front and backs of our medium marine and our heavy marine, both of which have been playable for a little while. And in the middle, you'll also see some feedback. So here you can see it says, maybe that helmet is too bulky. Maybe the legs are too bulky. So on this, we can also start doing feedback as well and doing kind of final iterations to move on before we go to the high poly stage, or also just handing it off to character art. So next is the high poly stage. This is where character art in general typically takes over. And I got a little video here so you can see some of the process of the tools that we use. So what you're seeing here is Marvelous Designer, which is essentially it's a software for making clothes. And the window you see on the right is actually a pattern. So if you've ever done costumes, this is how we create the patterns for the costumes, patterns for the costumes. And then we simulate it onto our body, and it basically creates it. So here we're creating a cape because it's a nice, simple illustration. But you can see it's a very cool, intuitive software that's gotten very popular, and it also adds a really nice level of realism. Here he's creating some seam lines. So he's going through and he's going to be able to define where those lines are and then create the compression inside of that so that it'll actually start to almost puff up and feel like kind of a puffy jacket, maybe a padded jacket, a down jacket. And the other piece of software we use a lot is called ZBrush. ZBrush is a digital sculpting package. Basically what that means is you take blocks of digital clay made up of polygons, and you can sculpt them using intuitive tools that are more like traditional hand sculpting than they are like polygon modeling. So here you see one of our artists creating a shoulder pad by duplicating the geometry, shaping it, using some brushes to move it around. And then he's going to start adding some details. So he's masking here, and you're going to see him start moving areas that are not masked to create some extra little details. This is probably character artist's favorite part of the process. It's definitely the most artistic, most fun part. It's almost everybody's favorite part.